Welcome, everyone. We want to jump in today. We're going to be talking today about a cloud-powered student lifecycle. And the key for a cloud-powered student lifecycle is the flexibility of adapting and integrating into whatever life is handing you. And so the key today in 2020 is really, we're talking a lot about how do we return to normal? But if we return to normal, is that really what we want? Or do we want to transform into a new normal? And that's where the cloud-powered student lifecycle is really key, to ensure that you have that flexibility to move forward and interact with whatever you want to and whatever you need to face. Because I think the situation that the world is facing today has highlighted for a lot of institutions the challenges, right? Some of the shortcomings that some institutions were aware of, but maybe could have ignored. And so what we're trying to do is have a conversation today about what kind of technology can we put into place to ensure that whatever situation our schools face in the future is only strengthening not only our ability to deliver education and drive student outcomes, but to ensure that our institutions continue to thrive as the years go by. And so when we look at what challenges are facing institutions today, it really centers around three spaces. It's accidental architecture, it's technical debt, and it's the educational culture that an institution has. And so when we talk about accidental architecture, whenever I say that to an institution, when I'm talking to provosts or administrators or CIOs, such as David, that I'll talk to in a minute, their eyes light up, because the term accidental architecture is a term that my team uses all the time. Education is a unique industry. We have very few institutions that came up after the advent of technology and after the advent of computers. Most of our institutions, a lot of our institutions, have been around for decades and centuries. And so what's happened is that technology has gotten layered upon itself, and we end up with what institutions are dealing with today, which is accidental architecture. If they were to untangle that and redo it, they probably wouldn't do it the same way they're facing today. And then culture is another challenge. The culture of institutions, of professors who bring in a lot of grant money, who often are given the ability to make requests or even demands of the technology that's presented to them or that they're able to use. The culture of maybe adversity to change, or of people who have been in place for a long time and are comfortable and don't want to learn new ways of doing things. That's another challenge for those of us who like to embrace change and like to challenge it. And so what I want to do today is bring in David Minahan. And he has had a great and arguably incredibly unique opportunity to help stand up a really reputable institution on the backs of some existing institutions. So there's some legacy knowledge and some strength there from a branding perspective. But he's had an opportunity, and he's doing this currently, to talk and to look at how do I build an institution in the data age. So I wanna bring David in, and I just want to talk to you, David. Can you tell us first a little bit about your background and your in Teddy London? What is it, and why are you excited? Why did you decide to be a part of it?
Well, my background. Hello, everybody. So yeah, I'm David. I've probably spent the last sort of 10 years of my career in sort of technology and transformation services dealing with the issues that you've outlined, which is, technical debt broadly, accidental architecture, which seems to be the architecture of choice in some organisations. I'm not sure they chose it, but it's the way it's evolved. And certainly that aspect of culture change or technology adoption, which is often much harder than we've anticipated or variable, I think, in terms of the ability of people to adapt to change. So, I mean, those issues are very difficult to deal with, and my experience of them is that they do have to be dealt with. My in my last role and the role before, I got a great deal of satisfaction out of turning things off, and I think people have ended up in a situation, and maybe more pertaining in the public sector in the UK rather than the private sector, where you can get money for new things. So you can get from the investment cycle in your organisation, people who invest in new things where there might be benefits, but turning things off doesn't really attract the necessary investment to be able to do that. And so as a result, it kind of gets left for a long period of time, creates a whole range of issues really in terms of, both information security, business practice, the ability to serve customers in a digital age in an effective way, and the ability for, I think, staff teams and organisations to be efficient. So you end up with repeated data silos, systems and applications that can't communicate with each other. People probably working on the same problem in replication in multiple parts of an organisation, and customers at the end of that potentially not getting a great service. So I think these patterns seem to replicate across a variety of sectors that I've worked in. I think my experience in higher education is there are some unique aspects, I think, to HE. And that is, I think, that the siloed nature of a university is quite unique. Quite often faculties are their own fiefdoms, and you'll have an eminent academic who will run that as a business in and of itself, or as an organisation in and of itself within the wider organisation. So achieving that culture change piece in a higher education institution across a horizontal is very difficult, and quite often the verticals in the organisation are quite distinct in terms of what they're trying to achieve and how they operate. And so that consistency of change and change adoption across an organisation is particularly challenging. So my fortune really has brought me to Teddy, I think, and the selling point, the opportunity, I think, for somebody like me is, I've got a blank canvas. I've been given, I've been in post now for nearly a year, be a year in October the 3rd. I think I was, one of the very early member of staff. So there's only maybe half a dozen other people there when I started, and no IT department. So, an IT department of one, which was me. So, and then the canvas then is really what are we trying to achieve as an organisation? What's the objective of Teddy London? And how can I help from a digital strategy perspective and a technology perspective to help them to achieve that? But not having to worry about technical debt and legacy systems is a wonderful opportunity, really. So that's how I've ended up there. I mean, we are making progress, I think, on a lot of things. Teddy itself, I think, is a very aspirational organisation. We've got 3 sort of global partners who have, founded and supported us in our mission. Arizona State in the US, UNSW in Australia, and King's College in London. And we're specifically focused on, I think, disrupting engineering education, creating a new pedagogy for engineering education, but also in terms of being able to provide a sandpit environment to experiment with new methods of doing things, either with technology or in person.
Yeah, that's fantastic, David. I'm really excited about how you're approaching technology in a completely green field, because that is not something that we typically see in education, is a brand new institution standing up with already the reputable institutions backing it. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're approaching a brand new institution?
Yeah, so I think for me that the key word in information technology is information. So we start
with no tech,
an organisation,
no challenging culture, sort of the dream first.
Hello. So we're getting a bit of lag. So the information in an organisation is its asset. It's probably its most important thing. So for me, thinking about designing an IT estate and a technical architecture that can support delivery of the business objectives lends me to thinking about the cloud technologies, really, and thinking about, wherever possible, what I can get working out of a common data service. So if you think about the IT, a long-term IT or business overhead is often in the reworking, remodeling and reprocessing of data that you already have. So because it's not in the same place, or it's talks to different things, the model's not consistent, or the integrations are very complex and not well understood. And so for me, trying to avoid those issues is of a paramount drive. And the way that we're trying to achieve that really is that the strategy talks to a cloud first approach to all of our technology, SaaS first wherever possible. So we've got the less of an overhead in terms of our own in-house resource or the ability to build things. We're not SaaS, then we will look at IaaS or building stuff out of a platform. And we've selected the Microsoft Power Platform as our main platform for developing business functions. And the reason for that really, and it's not to really want to sell Microsoft particularly, but for me the benefit is in the common data service. So if I can get my processes and applications and my people working out of a common data service with a common data model, a lot of my integration and data reworking overheads fall away on the long term. So that's kind of where we are, and we're kind of making some significant progress on that really. We've made decisions internally to develop our own student record system with a partner in the UK called A&S Group, and we've started work on that. And again, the reason for that, I did some analysis of the off-the-shelf solutions, and I've had some experience of working with some other suppliers in the past in that market. And it wasn't something that we wanted to enter into because of, we can see the future, if you like, of where the IT business and the organisation needs to be, which is about flexible and adaptive, being able to respond to business changes quickly and having a more iterative approach to the way that our applications work to respond to those changing business needs. And so having some control over that development and application lends us to wanting to develop something ourselves. But the beauty of it for us with using the Power Platform is that we also benefit from the enterprise security layers that Microsoft provide, the identity management services, but also we're able to benefit from an upgrade path that's an enterprise upgrade path, rather than having to worry about a supplier relationship upgrade path, or when we want to make a change to the platform itself, to think about how we get that change built into their roadmap. So for us, it's about having some independence. It's about benefiting really from what we see as the future direction of the technology as a whole, but also giving us some control really over how those processes look. So I think for us, that's been a core plank of it. And I think for our virtual learning environment, so again, it's a hot topic at the moment with COVID, how are we going to transition culturally to, mixed modes, ways of learning, or, remote learning. And for me, so I've done some analysis again of the learning management system market, which is generally a core component of a virtual learning environment. And I haven't found that I need to buy one. So, again, this is maybe a different situation to where I wanted to be or thought I would be, but I can't see that I need one to do what we want to achieve. And we successfully ran a summer school this summer for 147 students from 21 countries, fully remote, working on projects and collaborating on projects with our industry partner, British Land, geared towards creating dementia-friendly environments in the Canada Water Peninsula where we're situated, with seamlessness really, using Microsoft Teams and other associated products to enable us to do that. A learning management system at its core really is about content management. And so for me, for us, we're developing something we're calling a learning tree, which is a web user interface that surfaces our content. But the collaboration that we require for our students to have to work on projects in TEDI, which is the core aspect of our teaching pedagogy, requires us to have a really good collaboration environment. So again, and the beauty of it is that I can then, the assessment outcomes from the work that they do within our virtual learning environment can be integrated back into the common data service and surfaced through the student record system. So the architecture starts to make a lot of sense and it reduces a lot of overheads.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that what you're able to do coming in new, right, is you're not married to the SIS, LMS, ERP as we know it, right? You don't have that legacy. There isn't a whole decade's worth of content there. So I'm curious, for those institutions who are listening and with us who do have that legacy, right? But also are very well aware of the new state of the world. They want to take advantage of this virtual environment. I think there are a lot of people in the world, I know myself too, who from an education perspective, I don't want to be tethered to a classroom, right? I don't want my children to be tethered to a classroom, because I think the opportunity to learn in the space of different places in the world and experience the world while also getting an education is a fantastic opportunity that we can now afford all of our students. So how would you, if you put yourself back 5-10 years ago in your other roles, knowing what you know now about what's out there, right? You've had the opportunity to look at everything and see how everything can be done. How would you approach coming in from an institution who has a legacy, technical debt, culture, to try to put your institution on a path to look more like Teddy London, to detangle itself from some of this accidental architecture? What would that look like for you? What lessons would you wish you could tell David from 5 years ago right now?
So, I mean, I think just to acknowledge, I think, building a greenfield is much easier than transformation because for lots of reasons, and the technical reasons, but also the people reasons. So, one of the advantages that we have as a brand new organisation is that we're creating our own culture with the people that are employed. And although some of them may have some thinking and some legacy stuff that they've had from previous institutions, we're challenging ourselves as a collective to understand what is it we need processes to do. And just because we had processes in previous organisations, we ask ourselves the question, were they any good? Did they work for the organisation? Do we really need them? And I think so that we got that opportunity in a way that maybe some organisations don't. But that said, I mean, the question itself, I think, is a really interesting one. What would I do if I stood at Bristol University, for example? I think ultimately you've got to try and eat an elephant a bite at a time. And, but it's not going to go away. The problem doesn't resolve itself. So at some point you have to make a start. And I think that the biggest piece of advice I could give anybody really senior at any university or higher education institution is to really think about your planning cycle. So what the world is showing us now is that the organisations that are going to succeed and survive, I think, are those that can respond in more agile ways. So, what is the future going to look like in a year's time? We don't really know yet. And I think that question's more pertinent now than what it might have been even 12 months ago. Mm-hmm. And so the planning cycle of most universities is like a 2-year process. So you have a 2-year planning cycle before you get some money to do whatever it was that you were planning to do. And then you might have 3 years of delivery, and then you might get what you wanted 6 years after you first had the idea that you wanted to achieve it. And by that point, the technology landscape's completely moved on, the world's changed and everything's changed around you. So the idea probably didn't seem very sensible anymore by the time that you finished. And so the biggest piece of advice I could give is to think about your planning cycles, think about your budget allocation and how you can shift that to more agile delivery methods. And in terms of, in some ways, there's an advantage, I think, in the old structures. So the fact that they're not coherent businesses across a horizontal means that you can pick things off on a vertical if you choose to do so. So where is your success story in your university? Have you got an engineering department or a department that's really forward thinking about technology? What can you transition to for them first as a bright spot or a beacon in your institution to show others what's possible? And ultimately, I think any IT leader in any institution's got to be thinking about cloud. Running your own infrastructure, I think, is an overhead and a risk that you don't really need anymore. So how can you transition your services to cloud-based offer? And I think really the time's now to start doing that if you haven't already started. And it might be a long process. So you might have 4,000 services or something like that. That's going to take you years to transition, but the problem doesn't go away, and it has to be cracked at some point because the overhead of running the legacy just will eat you in the end. And so it is, I think, just taking these things one bit at a time, thinking about your planning cycle, finding a bright spot to work with in the institution. And I think if to think about it you can do front end and back end, really. You can think about how you disaggregate your integration layer, for example. Often people get stuck in a mire with we've got 300 integrations running out of our student record system. It's too complex to even unpick. Nobody really understands it. So how can we change? And ultimately, again, the problem's not going to go away. You have to think about how you're going to resolve that. And the thing about integrations is that you can do them one at a time. You can think about how you maybe integrate back into a common data service and do it step by step. Start to disaggregate your architecture and start to think about how you build that out into a more sensible architecture. So I think that would be the advice I'd give. Think about your planning cycle. Think about what you can pick off bit by bit, either with your people or your technology, and just start making progress.
I love that. And I think your advice is spot on, right? One of the things that I do when I work with schools is come in and we say, what's the one department, right? What's one process or one department that we could tackle that is a low investment, low risk, but high ROI, high return, it's very visible. There's always a department that is incredibly impactful and running on an Excel spreadsheet. And so when we can tackle that, automate some of those processes, hold them up, as you said, as a beacon, it's amazing how culture naturally will change from the ground up, which is, in my experience, and I'm sure you would agree, a way easier burden to tackle when people are demanding it, other than trying to force it on them.
Yeah.
And so
No,
try.
I completely agree, and I think you always have some people in an organisation who really want change, and I think especially where technology is concerned now, because most people are adept at using technology in their personal life. You know, you get complaints as an IT manager now. There's why can't our systems work like Amazon One Click, as an example? You know, I can order my shopping with one click. You try and explain what sits behind that is $1 billion database and, you know, fulfillment system, but ultimately the expectation for people that use technical solutions is much higher than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. So people working in organizations that are using old technology and can't serve their customers very well as a result will be frustrated. You know, and I think it is about them providing the right leadership to try and push yourselves out of that situation, because it does come down to leadership in the end. You know, the leadership need to be understanding where their direction is, how they're going to allocate the resources to achieve that, and how they're going to get the right people in to help them to do it, and the right partners. You know, a lot of these things, you need the right partners on board. You need to make sure you select your partners well and that they're working with you, you know, and it's not just a transactional relationship. You're entering into genuine partnerships.
Yeah, and I think speaking as one of those partners, one of the things I always encourage schools to do is bring us in and at least let us know what's going on, even if you don't think we can help. Most times, especially an organization like Microsoft or my colleagues at Google, Amazon, Apple, right, the big ones, we have resources most schools don't even know about. So the more that we can be transparent with each other and work in partnership instead of a vendor relationship, the more we can really transform our industry and transform our institutions. So I think you're exactly right? Don't look at us as just a vendor. Make sure that you're really bringing in your partners. I would also argue, bring in other institutions, right? Talk to your peers. I think institution to institution partnerships are really powerful as well. And I've seen that work even with different perspectives can be really transformational.
I mean, the
so
higher education,
thank you so much, David. Yeah.
Yeah, so the higher education communities tend to work very well together. I think, you know, there's a good spirit of collaboration, but from a technology lens, often people are a little bit behind, you know, other sectors. So again, I think my advice would be, for if you're looking at technology change really in higher education, is to think about what you can learn either from your partners or from other sectors as well. Because actually, if you're both trying to solve the same problem and you're not too sure how to solve it, you're probably going to need another lens on that to kind of understand how to do it. And there are lots of areas in business that are very good at solving these problems. You know, that's my experience, because their profit margin relies on it in a way that we haven't really had to think about in higher education probably until now. So how you can leverage that kind of insight as well, I think, is very important.
I 100% agree. Well, thank you so much, David. I love talking to you every time. I think your insights are brilliant, and I think your perspective from your position now, you probably have a lot of people who are jealous that you get to sort of play with all the new stuff and be imaginative in a way that most don't. So have fun doing that, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. So if you could bring up my next slide. You know, we only have a couple more minutes, but what I wanted to encourage everybody is, you know, go out and seek change within your institution. Don't look back on 2020 as a challenging time. Look back on it as a year that you were able to transform your institution leaps and bounds by leveraging the new technology that is out there. Leverage the cloud, leverage your partners. Go out and seek peers like David who have a unique perspective and a unique background to help you make the change in your institution. You know, we've been doing a lot of things in education for decades that, you know, research has shown maybe isn't great, but we're having challenges overcoming. We haven't been in a worldwide situation like we are today since the advent of data. This can be transformational. And if we do this right, this could be the year that we look back 10 and 20 years from now and say, that was the year that we really became a student outcome focused industry and really leveraged what technology has to offer. The last thing that I'll encourage schools to do is don't be afraid to reach out to your vendors and tell them exactly what is in your brain. What are you imagining? Don't just settle for the LMSs and SISs and ERPs that our companies are producing. Be imaginative like David is with teams, and you know, let us know what you want, what you need to deliver what you're trying to do for your schools. We're here to serve you, we're here to help you, we're here to collaborate with you. And so we want a partnership. And my hope is that, you know, this year is the year that we really can transform this institution. So we do have a couple minutes if there are any questions, but I did want to let everybody know, in the interest of cloud-powered student lifecycle, we do have an upcoming webinar later this month with one of our partners who's built a student lifecycle management system on our platform called Anthology, formerly Campus Management, if anybody is aware of them. We also will be releasing a brand new Forrester Total Economic Impact Report on that webinar. So I would encourage everybody to go to aka.ms/engage-webinar to sign up. And if there are any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Otherwise, we really appreciate everyone's time today. And thank you again, David, for your time.